Stand by for broadcast.
You're listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations.
Hi, I'm Flight Lieutenant Chris Solly, and welcome to the latest RAF Inside Air podcast. In this episode, we're going behind the scenes with the team at Defence Equipment and Support in Bristol.
You know, we make a vital contribution to sustaining our defence capability. So, yeah, very much unsung, I think, and not very well understood.
What we're calling the H-47 extended range. So that's an aircraft that has double the range of a standard Chinook. It has an in-flight, air-to-air refuelling capability.
Okay, it's going to have a cockpit though?
Yes.
Will there always be a pilot in the cockpit when it's in the air?
We'll get the answer to that question soon. As usual, we'll also reheat a few stories which could have slipped under your radar, and we'll be finding out who's under the hat this week with AS1 Ben Russell.
What's the best thing about your job?
The best thing about my job is the travel. In the years that I've been doing this, I've been lucky enough to go all around the world and play dress up in almost every role and responsibility that the Royal Air Force has, because where they go, and we have to follow them to tell their story.
Acquiring new platforms, upgrading current platforms so they remain relevant, and ensuring the support solutions, supplies and spares are all in place. This is the unsung role of Defence Equipment and Support, or DE&S. Squadron Leader Peter Lisney talks with DE&S's Director Fixed Wing and Director Rotary Wing, UAS and Air Enablers to find out how they deliver warfighting capability to the RAF, and discovers what to look out for in the coming years.
So I'm sat with Air Vice Marshal Phil Brooker, who's the Director Fixed Wing, and Mark Langrill, who's Director Rotary Wing, UAS and Air Enablers. And we're sat in DE&S, the Defence Equipment and Support building, just in Bristol.
Welcome.
Thank you. So those are your roles, or your titles. Let's start by, if you can tell us what your role really is. And if we start with you, sir, is that okay?
Yeah, no. Phil Brooker, Director Fixed Wing. I'm what they would call a programme and technical director within DE&S. So I've got programmatic responsibility as well as technical airworthiness responsibilities for the platforms I look after. And I fundamentally look after all the fixed wing platforms that face the Royal Air Force, all the way from Spitfires in BBMF, all the way up to F-35, to A400s and Voyagers in the air mobility fleet, and then if you then move into the I-Star fleet, Rivet Joint and E7 as well. So the complete inventory of what we would see as traditional fixed-wing platforms for the Royal Air Force.
All the fixed wing except for the UAS.
Except for the UAS.
Because that's Mark, that's your bag.
It is. So, Mark Langrill, I'm Director Rotary Wing, Uncrewed Air Systems and Air Enablers, and that's quite a mouthful, and it reflects the fact that between Phil's area and mine, we cover the entire gamut of what makes up aviation capability in the UK. As with Phil's role, I've got a programme element, so that can consist of buying new aircraft types or new air systems. It can consist of modifying them to meet new requirements. But I'm also responsible for delivering the in-service support, the spares, the technical information, the depth maintenance to support my aircraft types, and for underwriting their type airworthiness. And as you touched on, there are a number of fixed-wing platforms that do sit in my area, primarily those that are in the UK military flying training system. So that encompasses Hawk, as well, including T1 for the Red Arrows, but also the prefects at Cranwell. Likewise, the Phenums that we use for multi-engine pilot training, as well as the Texans at RAF Valley, and some of the fixed-wing uncrewed air systems like Protector, which also sit under the Royal Air Force.
Okay, good. Now, a little bit of background for you, Mark, because you haven't always been civil servant, have you?
So, no, I haven't. So I've been a civil servant since March of last year, prior to which I spent 30 years in the Royal Navy as an air engineer officer, which, as somebody who finds themselves delivering a portfolio of aircraft for all three services, is quite an interesting background. It gives me an insight into the Navy platforms that I support. But actually, if I reflect back on my time in the service, I worked with all three services, including time spent at RAF Witten in the Harrier IPT, in the GR7, GR9 days, as well as having held airworthiness responsibilities for both Chinook in Afghanistan and for Merlin when that was under RAF ownership. And if you go even further back than that, not something that I usually admit to, my father was a pilot in the Royal Air Force, and I grew up at Valley, Finningley, West Rainham, and a number of other Royal Air Force bases. So deep down, although I wouldn't say this in naval company, a real affection and sense of connection to the Royal Air Force.
Oh, you shouldn't have said that out loud because our other guest is going to get a little bit.
It's just between you and me.
Okay, absolutely. Good. So back to you, sir. What's your background?
So I'm now coming up to my 38th year in uniform. Third generation Air Force. My grandfather was in the Air Force Second World War. My father did 22 years in the Air Force, and I joined as a boy apprentice at 17. So I went through my apprenticeship at Cosford as an avionics apprentice, subsequently went to RAF Coltshire as a young junior technician and corporal, and then the Air Force decided that actually would give this young man an education, so they sent me to university. So they gave me a cadetship, and I went to the Royal Military College of Science to read engineering. And then I took a commission, went through IOT, Cranwell, and I've done a various number of jobs, but I've predominantly been in the combat airspace. So like Mark, I've done Harrier, I've done Tornado, I've done a lot of time on Typhoon, some time on F-35 as well. So a really good lead into my previous role, which was Director Combat Air, which has now morphed into Director Fixed Wing.
Okay, good stuff. So I'm talking to two engineers.
Yes.
And is it true that engineers can get emotional?
Of course.
Yeah, good.
I'm pretty sure it happened once.
Well, let's see if it gets emotional today. So we'd like to know a little bit more about defence equipment and support. So what is this place? What is this organisation? How big is it? What does it do?
I'll kick off. Right. DE&S, Defence Equipment and Support, for me is a critical enabler to about delivering warfighting capability to the frontline commands. As Mark has already said, we've got a broad range of responsibilities, from delivering and acquiring brand new platforms, upgrading our current platforms so they remain relevant in the operational theatre, but also, more importantly, sustaining them. So ensuring that the support solution is in place, the supplies, the supply solutions and the repairs and the spares are there to enable our pilots and our warfighters to continue prosecuting the threats that they've been tasked to do. So I would say we're the young unsung heroes, really, because everybody focuses on the sharp end and the pilots and the technicians on the frontline commands. But actually, without the people within DE&S, and we're a huge organisation, we're about 12,000 strong across the three environments. We make a vital contribution to sustaining our defence capability. So, yeah, very much unsung, I think, and not very well understood.
Okay. Maybe, Mark, you can tell us about the joint nature of this, contractors through to civil service, through to the front.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that comes to life if you look back on how DE&S came into being. It brought together what had previously been separate single service acquisition of equipment and capability. So we in Bristol support and at our sites around the UK support equipment for all three services, and that means that we can look across the things that the three services are asking for and deliver them in as integrated and interoperable a way as we can. So that's everything from soldiers' boots to rivet joint and Type 26 frigates. But we do that in a way which is, as you allude to, really closely joined up with both our frontline customers, who are the people who ultimately need the capability that we deliver, the MOD headquarters in London, who are responsible for setting the budgets and for setting the challenges that we need to deliver against. And in order to then deliver, we work very closely with industry, we work with contractors, and we work with the frontline commanders who are going to get our services. And we do that as we buy new equipment, and then we do it through the life of the capability. If that's an aircraft type, then we deliver not just the aircraft when we buy them, but we deliver the spares and support packages on which they rely, the technical documentation, and the input to the release to service that our engineers and our aircrew rely upon, and we update the aircraft as we go through life to make sure that they remain operationally relevant as well.
And you're also the air enablement part. That's the training. So you're involved in how to use these pieces of equipment as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we don't just buy equipment, we buy services as well. A UK military flying training system, which sits in Air Enablers, is a really good example of us working very closely with industry to deliver a capability for all three services. And alongside that, in Air Enablers, we have organisations like the Aircrew Equipment element of DE&S, which provides the flying clothing and other support that our aircrew need. So it brings together in DE&S not just equipment, but all of the other elements of support that go alongside things like infrastructure and the facilities that are provided at our air station to add up to a military capability.
So I suppose just to put it into context, into pounds, shillings and pence, showing my age now, I spend, just under £3 billion worth of taxpayers' money on an annual basis, and Mark, you'll have a similar amount. So it's a significant enterprise supporting the defence outputs from that perspective, as well as the complexity and the multi-dimensional nature of industry, frontline commands, DE&S, and main building. It's just a complex enterprise.
So to help us better understand this, is there any way of drawing a simile between buying an aircraft for military use and me going out and buying a new car? So because you talk a lot about maintenance and capability, and when you buy an aircraft like Typhoon, it wasn't completely capable the day it came into service, but capabilities were released over time. So can you just perhaps draw a parallel where there isn't one between buying a car and buying an aircraft?
So I think the Typhoon's a really good example. So that in itself has got a complicated dimension because there's three other nations involved. So we set out back in the late 80s, early 90s, recognising that we needed to replace our air defence F3 aircraft. So we set about describing, okay, so what is the military effect and what are the requirements that we need to deliver? And then that through a collaborative programme with Germany, Italy and Spain evolved what was then Eurofighter 2000 and which is now Typhoon. But with any platform, there is a trade-off between the time of getting into service and the capability. And what you don't want to do is try and put all the capability on the aircraft from day one, because the threat evolves over time. So what you want to be able to do is have a program that enables you to increment the capability. So we very much talk about now, what is the minimum viable product or minimum viable capability that's needed by the warfighter in the quickest amount of time? And then how can we spiral that capability? There's a really good lesson that's coming out of Ukraine at the moment, and you think about all the UAVs that are being used. The force that is able to field the capability first and then iterate it in the battle space as the threat evolves wins the operational advantage. And that's the same principle that we have for a combat aircraft. So Typhoon first started off as an air defence aircraft, air-to-air combat aircraft, but over time we've increased that capability such that it's now an air-to-surface platform as well. So it's got Brimstone and Storm Shadow as well as Paveway 4 on it. Those were capabilities that the aircraft was first delivered in the early 2000s with. So it's about what is the growth path of platforms. F-35 is exactly the same. We've had the platform now, the aircraft, for 10 years. We are now going through a major technical refresh to make sure the platform remains relevant for the next 20 years, and we'll have different capabilities going on the platform as well.
So how much of that is a bit like the Tesla, where you get a software update?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And And the art now is that actually it's not driven by hardware, because hardware is expensive, i.e. black boxes, avionic black boxes, because it's expensive and it's time consuming. More and more now capability is being released to the warfighter through software upgrades. Patches on your iPhone. So you have an iPhone with a basic capability, and then you enable that capability through the apps that we put on our iPhone. The same principle is now being applied to the ISRS Mark II that's going to go onto Typhoon. The same principle that the Global Combat Air Programme is going to work on as well.
So is there a shift in the culture in DE&S to this development of capability at pace?
Very much so. We're in the midst of, I think, the most fundamental reorganisation that I've seen in my long experience of working with DE&S, and that's all about exactly that point. It's about moving to an organisation which can see an opportunity, see a requirement that's set by one of the frontline forces, and have a very rapid conversation with both industry and the customer. To your point about buying a car, about what is it you need, how far would your budget stretch, what's the balance you want to strike between buying the fanciest car you can get or having some spare parts that mean you can operate it with confidence, and then turning that very quickly into a project which is delivered, and working with both MOD headquarters and the other parts of government like the Treasury to look to move through the approvals process so that we can very quickly experiment, prove a concept, and deliver it to the hands of the people at the front line so that they can start using it in anger as swiftly as possible. And then, as Phil said, if we need to spirally upgrade to add in additional capability and to add in resilience, we can do that as part of the subsequent activity where that's appropriate.
I think another really good lens to look through is look at the engineering workforce that we have got today and the engineering workforce that we'll need for the future. Whereas, we had aircraft that were made of titanium and aluminium and a traditional jet engine. We are now moving forward with regards to low observable. So what does that mean for our structures engineers? More and more elements are being software driven. So we need software engineers, which we haven't previously had. So not only does the organisation and the way we procure equipment need to evolve, the engineers that we need to support them day to day also need to evolve. Software, cyber, security, these are all going to be important factors in supporting, fifth and sixth generation aircraft.
So tell me about the relationships that you have with our industry partners.
So we have very, for the most part, very open and collaborative relationships with our industry partners. It's important for us that we involve them in conversations early, and we help them to make sure that we understand what they can deliver today and what they may be able to deliver tomorrow. And so we, in most of our aircraft types, have a lead, what we call a prime contractor, with whom the bulk of the conversation happens. But we increasingly look to them to bring in small, medium enterprises, to bring in the innovators who are out there bringing new technologies. And we're seeing a real appetite amongst most of our industry counterparts to do that, to become part of a sort of a federated industry solution who can bring us the very best of emerging technologies quickly. Now, as Phil says, we're seeing rapid changes in the technology that sits behind our air systems, and that's changing the balance between some of the traditional manufacturers of metal aircraft and those who are genuinely able to innovate. But industry are absolutely up for that challenge. They want to be part of the conversation. They want to be involved early so that they can plan ahead and they can offer us the best solutions that they can.
How difficult is it for SME, small to medium enterprises in the UK to break into this market? Because the MOD spends a lot of money, you just mentioned earlier. Have you had experience of working with some of these niche specialist manufacturers?
So I think the uncrewed air systems area is the most pertinent example of where we're really seeing success in that area. Much of the emergent technology, particularly in small uncrewed air systems, as Phil reflected, is being played out in Ukraine, is vested in small, medium enterprises. And that's driving a shift in our approach and how accessible we're trying to make that market. The barrier to entry in the past for small companies has tended to be just the level of process that the MOD puts in place, for good reasons, because we spend public money and we need to do that with some controls in place. But that's perhaps hampered our ability to draw on some of that innovative thinking, to draw on emerging technology, and to act at pace. And through the stand-up of what we call the gateway, which is now the front end of DE&S, we're seeing much more rapid, much more accessible development of technologies, proof of concept flying, with a much more streamlined way of getting that type of work launched into the main body of DE&S and then launched out to the customer. So we are seeing an active drive to reduce barriers to entry and make it much more feasible for small, medium enterprises to work effectively with DE&S and through DE&S with the rest of defence.
That's good to hear. That's good for the country's economy. And I suppose just to dive into the DE&S website would perhaps tell a potential supplier how to get on that ladder.
Yeah, and we're also seeing the relationship with the primes, the big aerospace companies, the BAE Systems, the Boeings and the Lockheed Martins. And they recognise that they also need to evolve into the digital systems engineering space and the simulation and digital modelling area. And they haven't got that expertise. So we're seeing more and more the large aerospace companies teaming up with the smaller digital companies that are moving at a rapid pace and pulling on that knowledge and expertise. BAE Systems has initiated FalconWorks, which is their equivalent of Skunkworks, and they are drawing in a lot of those small companies to bring that innovation and thinking to enable us to deliver that capability. And if you think I'll keep coming back to the sixth generation of the Global Combat Air Programme, if we are going to deliver that in a 2030 timescale, then we really need to get after these digital systems innovations to enable us to design, manufacture and build aircraft a lot quicker.
Strategic Defence Review, it's going to be released sometime this year. How is that anticipation affecting your jobs?
I don't think it's affecting our jobs. What it will do is will give us clarity on where the UK priorities are, and therefore internally we can then ensure that we've prioritised and allocated the resource internally to ensure that we deliver those outcomes. I think we would recognise that air, whether it be combat, I-Star, mobility, UAS or rotary, forms a fundamental part of the integrated force approach, which again is a key cornerstone into the NATO first policy. But we also need to recognise that actually as a business, we're quite expensive. So we've got to make sure that we deliver a more cost-effective outcome to defence. So I think we will still see a continuation where combat air is one of the central pillars for the Royal Air Force. Integrated ballistic missile defence, and if we think of it of a system of systems, that brings in the likes of Protector, the I-Star platforms, E7, Type 45, as well as the effectors of Typhoon, F-35, and land systems as well. So I think there will be some core things that come out. I think there'll be a recognition that the world has changed. The resurgence of Russia on our eastern flank and the continuing development of China and the Americans' 2027 policy. So that's going to continue to pace technology and ensure that we keep pace with our peers. But I also think there'll be a refocus of our commitment to NATO and Europe from that perspective. And the Navy may go back to deep water blue ops in the North Sea instead of loshing around in the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean.
There's nothing wrong with loshing around in the Mediterranean. Exactly as Phil describes. I think the SDR is happening against the backdrop of a world which needs defence more than it has for a considerable length of time, and against the backdrop of a nation who I think recognise that. So it's actually a really exciting proposition. if you look at the helicopters and uncrewed air systems part of defence, I mean, that affects all parts of defence. All three services use those capabilities, and the output, the people who come through the flying training system, and the equipment that we provide for our aircrew. So there's real opportunity in my area for what comes out of the SDR, but it is also happening against backdrop of a difficult financial climate, and so we're standing by to react to the things that defence asks us to do more of, and we know one of those things is going to be more resilience, more spares, the ability for us to operate for longer at longer reach, and that's something which I think we all welcome. But we also recognise there are going to be some tough choices in there. Yeah. So we're waiting to see what we have to stop or reduce doing in order to do the new things that defence asks of us.
Yeah, I was going to say that it seems like the remit always keeps enlarging, the number of people to deliver keeps reducing. Just within DE&S, how do you reconcile that challenge?
So, and much has been publicised about, and as Mark has mentioned, the significant transformation that DE&S is going through. We recognise that our contribution to that increase in capacity, agility, and capability needs to be delivered in a cost-effective manner. So we, over the last 18 months, 2 years, have been going through a significant organisational change, which looks to realign the organisation on how it delivers its outcomes. And a key element of that is actually getting after the waste within the organisation and lean in the way that we do business. But it's also about removing the bureaucracy so our people can spend more time delivering core defence outputs instead of running around getting approvals, etc. The other key element is actually, and this is where I think the SDR will help, is defence needs to understand what its priorities are. Because one of the things that we have suffered from is multiple demand signals from multiple customers that have never been really prioritised, and we've always struggled to resource everything. So the gateway, as Mark has mentioned briefly, is that front door that is about prioritising defence's requirements, but also working with industry, academia as well to see what's on the horizon, how can we deliver that effect in a different way. If we need a replacement tank, we automatically go, we need to buy and build a new tank. Well, that may not be the answer for 20 or 30 years. And then from the core, which is the main area of the organisation that delivers acquisition and support, it is about how do we simplify the way we do business and how do we release the capacity. And then the third vital element is the systems integration bit. How many times have we heard that the Type 45 can't talk to the Typhoon and the Typhoon can't talk to the E7? So how do we ensure that actually we've got a defence enterprise that is fully integrated and actually can deliver effect far more efficiently and effectively,
and not just defence across NATO?
Oh, absolutely across NATO. But one thing I'd like to but add to what Mark was saying is the SDR will give us clarity and it will give us priority. I think also linked to that, the national industry strategy and the subsequent defence industrial strategy that sits beneath that, I think will also give clear clarity for our industry, because we talk about the domains of air, land, sea, space, and cyber, and how there are deterrents for the Russias and the China. I would offer that actually if we have got a agile, resilient industrial base that can react and deliver military capability to meet the changing environment, that in itself is a deterrence. So I think that industrial strategy and the defence industrial strategy should play side by side with the SDR as well.
Okay, what we're going to do now, I'd like to pick up on some of the current capability and future capability, and this, I think this is what people want to know about. And I'm going to start off with Puma, because for so many years Puma has delivered incredible capability to its users, to its customers. Puma's going out of service. Can you bring us up to date? When is it going out of service, and when is the replacement coming in, and is there a gap?
So it's a great opportunity to pay testament to Puma as the remarkable servant that it's been to the Royal Air Force and the nation. That's an aircraft that came into service in 1971, so it gives you a sense of just what a stalwart that it's been. And as you touch on, the decision has been taken that it won't be extended beyond the end of its current support arrangements, which is the end of March this year. So we'll see the last Pumas go out of service in a couple of months' time. In terms of what that means for capability, Puma is currently used in two specific arenas. It provides a contingent capability in Cyprus, not least in terms of providing a firefighting capability, and it supports the training of British troops in the jungle environment in Brunei. There is a project in place to replace that capability with 6 Airbus H145, so an aircraft broadly similar to the Jupiters that we use at Shawbury and at Valley. That will be a capability that comes online later on this year in terms of IOC, but the full capability arrives next year. So the consequences of that are that there will be a short capability gap, but with contingencies being put in place for the most critical elements of that, which will help us to bridge that period.
So do we know what is going to fill that gap? What is going to come along after Puma goes out in March?
So in terms of the two specific missions that Puma discharges today in Cyprus and Brunei, we have a contingent capability being developed for the Cyprus firefighting task, but that's not something I can expand on at this stage. In terms of Puma's original core mission, which was the medium helicopter support to UK Armed Forces, we have the new medium helicopter programme, which is underway and which will provide the backfill for that primary fighting capability.
So do we know what's going to ultimately replace Puma?
So we have a live competition for the Puma replacement, which is the new medium helicopter. That's a live competition which is in the proposal assessment phase, and for that reason it's commercially sensitive, but it is in the public domain that we have a single bidder. Nevertheless, the competition has been taken forward under very tight competitive conditions, and we expect to be able to say more on that through the course of this year.
Can I probe again? Are there going to be any capabilities that this new medium helicopter will bring that the Puma didn't?
So it's a more modern aircraft. It has a slightly different payload. Again, we're still working through the exact balance of range and mission capabilities, and it would be inappropriate to comment at this stage. But in terms of providing a more modern, more reliable, more crashworthy, and largely military off-the-shelf solution with commensurately lower operating costs, then we expect to see some significant differences between what has been a faithful but now legacy platform and a more modern platform.
Okay. Can you draw, back to you, sir, can you draw similarities between Hercules out of service, A400M, Atlas, and that transition?
So the transition fully to A400M, so we've retired all our C-130s. They're currently going through the disposal process. But A400M is a step change in sort of payload and range. The key element that we are now working with is actually how do we take the Special Forces capability that was with C-130 and put it onto A400M so we get a full tactical and strategic airlift capability.
Okay. I'm going to bounce back to rotary Chinook, because I'm sure that's you have a soft spot for Chinook, given your experience in your Royal Navy career. I understand that there's a number of new Chinook coming to the UK, coming to the Royal Air Force. How many are coming? When are they coming? And what's going to be different about them?
So it's a really exciting programme and part of a wide recapitalisation of the Royal Air Force helicopter fleet. So Tranche 1 of the Chinook Capability Sustainment Programme, you're absolutely right, is the procurement of 14 new aircraft to a standard that we haven't had before. So what we're calling the H-47 extended range. So that's a an aircraft that has double the range of a standard Chinook. It has an in-flight air-to-air refueling capability and can carry up to 55 personnel, as well as having a very advanced cockpit and a very advanced mission system, which expands the scope of what an aircraft of that type can do.
And will we be selling the old ones?
So a decision's already been made with regard to the rundown of the fleet. So we have some, again, very long-serving and now relatively old Chinooks. And so the decision has been made that as we approach the point where we buy the 14 new aircraft, we will retire 14 of the oldest aircraft from the fleet. Those will be retired at the point where they become due for major maintenance. That's going to cost us money and time, and the return we'd get on that would be relatively limited. What we do those aircraft is still under consideration in terms of whether we harvest them for components which improve the availability of the remaining fleet and reduce the cost of ownership, or do something different.
Okay. You talked earlier about Typhoon. What is the out-of-service date for Typhoon? How long are we going to see Typhoon in the sky?
So from a Royal Air Force perspective, we are going to see Typhoon till at least 2040. But that's not the end of the programme, because the other partner nations, Spain, Germany, Italy, have just procured or placed orders in for additional Typhoon aircraft, which will see their fleets go out to 2060 and beyond. So Typhoon for us is a scarf in between Typhoon, F-35 and GCAP coming in as well. They will form the combat air mass for the Royal Air Force in that 2040 to 2060 period. So the Chief is quite open, talking about the hard OSD date is 2040, but he talks about into the 2040s now, because we recognise that actually, like many platforms, just as they go out of service, they are the most capable they've been in their lifetime, and we don't know what 2040 and beyond is going to look like.
So the replacement GCAP, can you tell us what GCAP is? Tempest?
Yep. So GCAP, the Global Air Programme. This is a tri-national collaboration between ourselves, Italy, and Japan to design and build what we would call a sixth-generation aircraft. This is to move beyond F-35 Lightning to the next platform, which will have longevity out to the 2080s, 2090s. But it's also about making and exploiting the best use of the technology and capabilities that will grow through that period of time. So in the same way where we have seen Typhoon and F-35 enter service, and then their capability spirally be upgraded, a similar approach will be taken for GCAP. But it wants to employ far more of the digital technologies that we've got. We would all recognise plug and play in our computers. You can just plug something in and the computer recognises it. We struggle with that in the combat airspace, in the aviation space. So how do we put in an operating system on the aircraft that enables us to plug and play different sensors or different weapons, which gives us choice and versatility for the missions that GCAP can undertake? But we've got to remember GCAP is just one part of the overall of the Future Combat Air System. That is the manned vehicle. And there is still much thinking and development work going into the uncrewed systems of the loyal wingmen as that may be seen. And how do they fit in, not only with the GCAP fleet, but how do they fit in with the F-35 fleet and the Typhoon fleet as well? So we have that system of going from fourth generation to fifth generation to sixth generation.
So can you tell me, we as a nation have partnered with Italy and Japan. Why did we not look to North America?
So North America is running its own sixth generation platform, the Next Generation Air Defence programme. So at the moment that is very much a US eyes only project. But actually we've got to remember, military capability is one thing, but it's also about how do you sustain the industrial base? How do we have the prosperity agenda? How do we meet the prosperity agenda? How do we ensure that we invest in high technology jobs and capabilities that actually gives benefit back to the nation as well as military capability? So behind every great military program, there is always an industrial strategy. I always used to joke on the Typhoon program, the fact that we got some military capability with Typhoon was just by sheer coincidence, because it was all about sustaining the aerospace industrial capability of the four nations. But as I mentioned earlier, we need to now look at our industrial base and our industrial capability as a deterrence for our future competitors, whether that be Russia or China.
I should imagine in the event of a major conflict, every nation will be looking to produce equipment for their own needs and defence, so we need to be, as a nation, resilient.
No, absolutely. And you think about an international partner or a collaborative programme for Typhoon, Germany, Italy, Spain and the UK have all got assembly lines where they can produce and build Typhoons. So that in itself brings resilience to NATO. Different manufacturers, different parts of the aircraft are manufactured all over Europe. So again, that gives us depth. F-35. Something is manufactured in every state in the US, which gives resilience, also gives political influence, mind you, as well, in Congress and the Senate. But it is about that diversification and that resilience and depth.
So is GCAP Tempest, is that one and the same, just to be clear?
So Tempest is the name that's being given to the demonstrator that is being designed. So like many aircraft programs, they start off with a demonstrator, which enables development activity to be undertaken. That's being undertaken on what we're calling Workstream 5. You would have seen much of it, I think, heralded in the media before Christmas because it's being manufactured and being built at Samlesbury. So that'll be our test bed. I think is a good way of using it. It won't be the end, and the end aircraft may look different as well, but it enables us to test some of the new technologies and the new concepts early on.
Okay, it's going to have a cockpit though?
Yes.
Will there always be a pilot in the cockpit when it's in the air?
Currently, yes.
Okay.
Currently, yes.
Okay. Right, brings us neatly over to drones. We're not allowed to use the word drones, but we're going to use it for the simplicity of this. It's uncrewed aerial systems. Drones. Mark, tell us what's going on there.
So a huge amount. We've touched a little bit on the proliferation of drones, the effectiveness we're seeing drones have in the Ukraine conflict, and the speed of development and just the rate at which that technology is increasing, and a huge amount of work going on in the UK industrial base into drone technology as well. So through the DE&S operations directorate, we've recently placed £45 million worth of contracts for the delivery of more than 30,000 new drones to Ukraine. Really important to them and to the support we're trying to provide to the conflict in Eastern Europe, but also from our perspective, an opportunity to learn a great deal about how we both procure and how we work with industry to design drones.
UK MFTS, the Military Flying Training System. We've had some episodes on that on Inside Air. Be interested to take your view on where that is at the moment and where it's going.
So UK Military Flying Training System is one of three parts of the flying training system. It's what we call Phase 2. It's the bit where we take somebody who's been through Cranwell, having been selected for aircrew training, and we teach them to fly an aircraft or to operate as rear crew, or to operate as an uncrewed air systems operator, and get them to the point where they can then go on to a frontline aircraft type to be converted at an operational conversion unit. And UK MFTS does that for all three services across all of the pipelines, by which I mean whether you're going to be a fast jet pilot, to fly multi-engine aircraft or rotary wing, or to be an I-Star operator. UK MFTS provides all of that complexity, both in terms of managing the syllabus, managing people's training, providing the aircraft and to a large extent providing the instructors, the people who do that work, with military instructors alongside civilian in the cockpits. It's a training system which has made some headlines over time when there have been perturbations in the throughput. Not least last year when we saw some availability issues with rotary wing aircraft at Shawbury, and then over the last couple of years through the fast jet pipeline at Valley, driven to a large extent by challenges in Hawk engines. But overall, today the flying training system is in balance. So we've seen the holdovers between sections of the flying training system reduce, and continue to see the flying training system across more or less all pipelines deliver as many people as the operational conversion units for all three services can deal with.
We haven't talked about C-17.
Okay.
Is there anything going on with C-17?
C-17 is the workhorse of the Royal Air Force, and whilst I think we've got 6 or 7 of them as part of the wider global fleet, it continues to be the silent partner in our strategic airlift capability, and actually it works in really good complementary with A400M as well, and all being located at Brize Norton at the airlift hub as well. That collaboration between C-17, A400M and Voyager, it is a really good team effort there.
E-7 Wedgetail?
E-7 Wedgetail is a world-beating air command and control platform, which will be essential in delivering combat air today and also the future. It is a step-changing capability and technology to that we had with the E3 from that perspective. Its capacity to manage threats is formidable. And whilst we've only bought 3, I think everybody who operates would like to see more. And so much so, Australia's been operating the platform for a number of years. The Americans are just about to buy, I think, 2027, that sort of number, and it's looking to be the platform of choice to NATO. So actually, that E7 will form part of, that integrated force for NATO in the European and the Asian Pacific theatres.
Last one, we talked about it briefly, F-35. How many more are we going to receive?
So we are currently got on contract for 48. The last aircraft is due to be delivered next year, BK-48. We, under the last defence outcome, we got an approval for a further 27, which would take us up to 72, and that's sufficient to support the 2 aircraft carriers out to their OSD of 2069. Now that position we are hoping will be re-endorsed in the SDR that's going to come out later on this year.
With F-35, if you're able to answer this question, it would be interesting to know how those numbers fit into the NATO footprint for F-35. If we were to talk about how many F-35s are operating in Europe,
yep.
Do you know that?
Yeah, so I think we need to recognise that the F-35, whether it be an A, B or C model, will form the backbone of Western combat air forces. The total projection of numbers of F-35 is 3,500 in total. In 2 or 3 years' time, there'll be 500 F-35s in Europe. So when you think about how NATO cooperates and the interoperability, F-35 is actually a fundamental foundation stone for that capability.
This has been really useful, really interesting. I'm going to ask you 2 questions just to sum up. And first question is going to be, what's the biggest challenge you're facing in your respective teams? And then the second thing is, what are you most excited about in your teams? So I'm going to ask you, Mark, first. What's your biggest challenge that you have in Rotary?
So the biggest challenge is that there is just so much ambition in what we want to do in helicopters and uncrewed air systems that finding the capacity to do all of it at the same time is a real challenge. So now that's the reason that we're working so hard in DE&S to cut through the bureaucracy, to give the brilliant people that we have in this organisation the ability to do as much as they can to meet the voracious demands of all 3 services who quite rightly want to exploit the technology and the opportunities that we see in helicopters and in UAS. The thing that I'm most excited about is just that pace of development. If you look at across aviation, but if you look at the integration of uncrewed air systems, which are going to be a feature across everything we do in defence in future, whether that's hand-launched or the strategic things like Protector, but completely interoperable and connected to the crewed platforms that we will continue to see operating. And the pace at which we go from recognising we need to do something different to counter a new threat to it becoming a demand that the Air Force give us to delivering it is going to get quicker and quicker and quicker, drawing on the best advice that industry can give us and working closely with our allies. And that's just a great place to be operating in.
Super. Sir?
I suppose the biggest challenge for me, and I'll be quite introspective of being an engineer, is how do we encourage the younger generation of today to be the engineers of tomorrow? Because they're not going to be a traditional engineer as me and Mark are now. They are going to be different engineers with different skills. So I hope what people see and hear, what we do in DE&S, inspires them to take on the STEM subjects and get themselves interested in engineering, because we haven't got enough of them now, and I don't think we'll have enough of them in the future. So, and if we want to continue to be a leading deterrent and player in NATO, we'll need the engineers with the ideas, the innovation and the skills that ensure that we maintain at the cutting edge of military capability. So that's my biggest challenge. And what excites me, as I said, my background has predominantly been in combat air, growing up through Harrier, Tornado, spent a lot of time on Typhoon and F-35. For me, what excites me is the next step. We briefly spoke about GCAB and the 6th generation aircraft. There is technology emerging that we don't really understand today that will be applied and incorporated in this platform all the way out to take it out to the end of this century.
Wow. Okay. So, exciting job to have here.
It's the best job.
It's the best job.
Second best job.
What's the best job?
Mine.
Oh, I see. Right, okay. Good. Bit of a bun fight going on here. Well, Mark Langrill, Air Vice Marshal Phil Brooker, thank you very much for giving us an insight to DE&S. Thank you for being on Inside Air.
You're most welcome.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm AS1 Emma Kerwin, and this is Reheat, where we take a look at some of the RAF stories you might have missed. Royal Air Force Typhoons, Voyager and personnel have joined counterparts from the United States and Australia to take part in exercise Red Flag in its 50th anniversary year, marking 48 years of UK participation. The large-scale exercise at the Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada, lasting 2 weeks, tests and develops the skills and integration of all the participants, aircrew, controllers, technicians and support teams. Personnel including from 51 Squadron Rivet Joint Aircrew and Air Operations controllers from 19 and 20 squadrons are among those taking part. Meanwhile, at RAF Lossiemouth, the first Joint Exploration and Discussion of Initiatives Symposium of 2025 has taken place, bringing expertise from the USA, Canada, Germany and Norway. Over the course of a week, the RAF and 4 other nations worked together as a single fleet. Working as combined international crews, personnel completed simulated Poseidon anti-submarine missions as part of a training exercise to develop their skills and improve collaboration between the nations. The Chief of the Air Staff, Air Chief Marshal Sir Rich Knighton, has visited RAF and Army personnel at MOD Lynham. The visit showcased the Defence College of Technical Training as a tri-service training provider, demonstrating the strengths and benefits in training Royal Navy, British Army and RAF specialists alongside each other. And the UK Armed Forces personnel and veterans are getting ready to join 20 nations to compete in adaptive sports at the Invictus Games Vancouver Whistler 2025. The Invictus Games uses the power of sport to inspire recovery, helping wounded, injured or sick servicemen and women reclaim their purpose. and future beyond their injury. The MOD and the Royal British Legion are supporting Team UK to compete at the 7th Invictus Games, which features winter sports for the first time. That was Reheat for Inside Air.
Thanks very much, Emma. And now it's time to find out who's under the hat with Ben.
I'm AS1 Ben Russell, and this is Under the Hat, where we get to know an aviator in less than a minute. Name you're known by.
I am Squadron Leader Leslie Woods.
What's your profession?
So I am a Media Operations Officer from RAF Holton in the RAF Reserves.
What's the best thing about your job?
The best thing about my job is the travel. In the years that I've been doing this, I've been lucky enough to go all around the world and play dress up in almost every role and responsibility that the Royal Air Force has, because where they go, and we have to follow them to tell their story.
Hardest part of your job?
What I don't like about this job is the lack of understanding. I think people think media, PR, pink and fluffy, write a press release, pop out a tweet. How hard is that? Actually, it's a proper discipline. And I think the ones who do respect that, and certainly the new senior officers that are coming up through the ranks now, understand the importance of media, and that's nice to see.
Best location you've served?
I loved my time on Ascension Island, which is essentially a subtropical island where we have a small RAF base that we share with the US Air Force. And it's all tropical fish, lovely sunshine and amazing weather, and that was just beautiful.
What bit of luxury kit do you never deploy without?
Personal piece of kit, it is my hypoallergenic Posturepedic pillow with a silk pillowcase, because why be uncomfortable? Any fool can be uncomfortable.
And what's your proudest moment in the RAF?
I think it was actually graduating College Cranwell. My dad, who's now passed away, was a wing commander in the RAF, and he got to see me graduate, and he got to be there on the day, and I think that was quite nice for him. And I've almost made it to the same rank that he was, so that's something I shall look forward to.
Thank you, Squadron Leader Woods, for being the latest aviator to take part in Under the Hat.
That's all for this episode of Inside Air. Please give us a review, subscribe via your favourite podcast app, and join us again soon.
You've been listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations. If you're serving in the RAF and have a story for us, please speak to your unit media and communications officer. Inside Air is written and produced for the Royal Air Force by RAF Media Reserves.